I think it depends on how much of a variation, but I think it is important to remember that there was a vote on the first motion, which failed, and we're on this one now. So if something was brought that is substantially the same as the first one, then I would say it would be out of order, unless it was from someone who voted against it, who brings it, then that is a possibility.
As a move to reconsider.
As a move
or,
to
or
reconsider.
something significantly different.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the purchase of the 24,956 acres, but not 24,000.956 acres, but not pay anything greater than the higher of the two appraisals obtained by the district. This was made by Dr. O'Connor and seconded by Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. We are going to vote on this.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bush?
No.
Mr. Shamley? No. Mrs. Goodwin Caldwell?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Meek?
No.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
Yes.
Dr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sailors?
No.
Mr. Suddeth?
No.
Mrs. Wells?
No.
Mrs. Levinas Wells?
No.
9-2 no.
The motion fails. So we are back to the original motion. If I can see, well, I think I have it. The recommended motion is to approve the purchase of 24.956 acres as depicted in the survey dated July 1st, 2019 for Fort Shoals School. And there was a second. Could you tell me who the second was? The maker was Mr. Meek, and the second was Mr. Sailors. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
I have
Oh,
my hand
you had
up.
your hand up?
Yeah.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Dr. Cristobal
That's okay.
O'Connor.
If the motion fails,
If this motion fails.
then are we allowed, how do you get it back to the possibility of getting more information in 2 weeks and voting again, as opposed to if you vote no and the motion should fail, then it just is a rejection of the offer, right? Whereas if we could get the information and increase the number, potentially you could get comfortable with making the purchase. We're not losing anything by waiting. Is that correct?
That's correct. But there would have to be, if this should fail, then there could possibly be another substitute or another motion, since this would be a failed motion. We could do another motion. I'm going to ask council, what's your opinion on this? Because we've had a bunch of motions.
No, if it were to fail, then the agenda item would move on from that on the agenda. That would for this evening it would move on.
Okay, so it would be removed from the agenda. Okay, so Ms. Wells.
So this is voted down. If it were voted down, then there's what does the administration? How do you interpret the motion if you vote this down, understanding the conversation that's been behind it? Does
For Dr. Royster on that.
At this point, we don't acquire the property.
so you stop working on any sort of resolution or any additional negotiation on the property? Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Now it's-
we'd have to confer and decide at that point what our recommendation might be.
Okay. It doesn't, I mean, given that we didn't take board action for you to enter into any negotiations and bring us a contract, so I wouldn't believe that just voting to not agree to these contract terms would mean that you would not, that it would bring a halt to any consideration of property acquisition.
It's
That's
still our belief that we need to acquire the property.
right. Okay.
Without speculation,
There you go.
we need to go ahead and take the vote. So, Mr. Sudduth, you have a question?
Why don't we vote to see where it's yes or no?
That's what we're going to do. That's
a good idea.
That's what I'm going to do.
With all due respect, I want to understand if I vote yes or no, what that might or might not. I can't decide how I want to vote
But we
if I don't
can't
know what's going to
speculate.
happen.
There's no way to speculate. We just have to vote. Miss Michelle Goodwin-Caldwell.
And so the due diligence isn't up until after October the 8th. So why shouldn't
It
we?
depends on the vote, Ms. Caldwell.
No, but I'm saying that, I mean, even if we have those 2 weeks deferring to October the 8th, we still have time on the contract, is what I'm
That's
saying.
correct. That's correct.
So, I mean, if we're asking for the extra information that they did not have to do these appraisals,
Yes.
we should give them that time so that we have the full information.
Right.
So we can make an informed decision.
That's correct.
I don't like being pushed into a vote either if we don't have all of the information.
Okay.
You know, I would love for us to have that property, but if he did not have all of the information he needed to do a thorough appraisal, then, you know, I think that we need the information. That's all we're asking for. We're not saying that we don't want to purchase the property.
Right.
We just want all of the information.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody else? I want everybody happy. Okay. Roll call.
Ms. Bush?
No.
Mr. Shamley?
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin-Caldwell?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Meek?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
No.
Dr. O'Connor?
No.
Mr. Sailors?
Yes.
Mr. Sudduth?
Yes.
Mrs. Wells?
Nope.
Levinus Wells?
Yes.
Six, five, yes.
The motion carries.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Is,
ma'am?
is there a difference in the kind of majority you need if it's over a certain amount of money, or does it matter?
No.
Yes, sir.
The-
Okay,
the
so
price.
at this time, the recommended motion from the administration and the board to approve the purchase of 24.956 acres as depicted in the survey dated July 1st, 2019 for Fort Shoals School will be sold at $243,321. Okay? That is what the district will pay. At this time, we will move to 5.03, Audit of Education Finance Act Student Classification. There's a recommended motion from Internal Auditor Services, and I will turn this over to Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
We performed this audit to ensure that students were properly classified in the Power School system in order to receive maximum Education Finance Act funding. The audit period covered August 20th, 2018 through March 26, 2019, and included a review of special education classification data and Power School data for 1,572 students at 11 district locations. For each location, we ensured that EFA classifications were correct. For any errors, we ensured that corrections were made prior to the 135th attendance day. The report consists of one observation. For special education student classifications reviewed, overclaims of $364.07 and underclaims of $1,282.67 were noted. These discrepancies would have resulted in a net underclaim of $918.60. As stated, all the errors noted were corrected prior to the 135th day of attendance. In addition, it should be noted that significant improvement has been made in the process of ensuring student classifications documented in IEPs are appropriately communicated to attendance clerks. Our recommendation is special education services should continue to monitor EFA classifications in Power School and communicate the proper information to school clerks.
So are there any questions for Mr. Barber? I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to accept the audit.
To accept the audit of EFA student classifications. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion to accept the audit of EFA student classification has been passed. Thank you, Mr. Barber. But before I go to the next 6.01, I just want to thank the students from Furman University for being here tonight. I know you might be getting a little tired, and I know you've got some exams, so I just wanted to recognize you. If you would stand up, please. We appreciate you being here. Didn't want you to go unnoticed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
6.01 Internal Auditing Services Project Status Report. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We're presenting our monthly project status report disclosing information on our projects that we're currently working on. We've also included an additional worksheet to provide a time summary of the status of current projects, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Barber? Thank you. It was information only. Thank you so much, Mr. Barber. At this point, 6.02, proposed cell tower leases at Berea and Southside High School. I will turn this over to Mr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Venice-Wells. Let me draw you back in time a little bit. About 5 years ago, in 2014, the district issued an RFP for competitive bid for companies that could install communications towers at locations desirable to carriers and would ultimately generate revenue for the district. Well, it's been a long time coming, but we now have 2 potential sites that are very close to final approval. And instead of, as we would ordinarily do with a contractual matter, bring it directly to the board, because these are the first ones actually coming to you for approval, we wanted to do a little presentation tonight, and really it's what we're doing in lieu of a superintendent's report, though you'll have the opportunity certainly to ask questions of Mr. Farkas from Milestone, or Mr. Carlin, or Ms. Stack, or myself, or Mr. Webb, or anyone involved in the process. We likely will come to you at the special call meeting at the CAL with an approval for a contract. We wanted you to have the information, have time tonight to see it, to ask some questions, and then if you have questions that occur to you after the presentation, time to get the answers for that before it comes time to vote on it. Again, particularly because this is the first group to come through, and there are 2 sites, Berea and Southside. Milestone has everything they need as far as discretionary permits. That is, permits that could be denied that would prevent the construction. They still have some permitting going forward. Those are primarily county building type permits that they are not discretionary. They have to be issued when Milestone has met the conditions of the permit. But there has been a slight change to the contract in order for us to move this forward not having those permits in place, Mr. Farkas has proposed to us to amend the contract a little bit so that should anything happen in that permitting process, we will receive the stated amount in the contract as if the permits went through. It's basically an act of good faith to reassure us that that permitting process will move forward. But I'll turn it over now to Mr. Farkas, and I ask him to present the information related to the two towers at Berea and Southside. Mr. Farkas?
Great. Thank you, Dr. President. Members of the board, my name is Len Farkas. I'm the president and owner of Milestone Communications. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you the information regarding these two applications. But just very briefly, we have been in business for 20 years. We've built over 150 towers in partnership with schools and municipalities in over 6 different states. We have a very strong footprint in the Carolinas, in both Charleston, Greenville, Richland, and Pickens County. We believe that the towers built on municipal sites are good locations because they're large sites and we have the ability to be able to mitigate the visual impact. As Dr. Royster had mentioned, we won a competitive procurement to be able to partner with you back in 2014. It's taken us a few years, but we finally have 2 sites that are almost shovel ready and have been through all the processes necessary through the county, the Board of Zoning Appeals. In a nutshell, we have 2 choices for you. These don't need to be made tonight, but they're choices to either receive, effectively our contract allows for 40% of the gross revenue from the tower to be paid to the schools. For every dollar we collect, 40% goes to the schools. Plus we pay a $25,000 site access fee, and for every additional carrier after the first carrier, an additional $5,000 per carrier. Or the board can choose to accept $100,000, which represents the first 10 years of the first carrier. If we have immediate needs to use the resources. Same identical deal, is just effectively we fast forward all of the rent over a 10-year period at your discretion. These are photographs, examples of the work that we do. We build towers on municipal sites in places where they tend to blend in near the athletic fields. The first site I'd like to share with you is Southside High School. The location that was selected by your staff, your team, was located to the southeast of the property in a wooded area. This is a 130-foot tall monopole. Verizon is our primary carrier with a 50 by 50 fenced-in area. We filed for the application. We held community meetings after a thorough public process. We were approved unanimously by the board on May 8th of this year. This just gives you an indication of what the tower will look like. We flew a balloon and we took photographs from different locations to photo simulate what the tower would look like after it's constructed. These give you an indication that they're taken from different locations throughout around the property. And again, this is what the tower will look like. The next tower is Berea High School. The tower location that was selected by staff was proximate to the baseball field. Again, this went through identical process to the Board of Zoning Appeals. By the way, these 2 towers will be our second and third tower. We built the tower at the Parks and Rec headquarters office. We have a very similar partnership with Greenville County Government. Same process, Board of Zoning Appeals, about the staff. We received notification of approval. We built a website with the information on the website, notified the community, held town hall meetings, and then again was unanimously approved on June 12th of this year. This is again a 125-foot tall monopole next to the baseball field, approximate to the football field. It's in a location where there are other existing tall poles. So this again gives you an indication of what the tower will look like. This blends in very nicely because of its proximity to the football field. And again, this site will serve AT&T as the lead carrier. The next steps are we are within days of obtaining final approval for this high school, the Berea High School site, and should be able to start construction in November. And then the south side, Southside property, we should be able to obtain approvals in November. I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding these applications, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present them to you.
Thank you, Mr. Porkus. Any questions? Yes, Mrs. Michelle Goodwin-Caldwell.
Okay, I'm looking at the photos that you have here, and they're kind of a little different from the photos that you had at the community meeting for the Southside proposed site. Did that site change from whenever you did it at the community meeting? Because I'm looking with me looking at the photos, it looks like that it was supposed to be in the wooded area closer to the road, but it's looking like it's closer to the school now. So did that site change from when you did it back in September of 2018?
The only part that changed was the access. Originally, the access point was intended to be off of a different road, but after an environmental evaluation, it was determined that the impact to the wetlands and the floodplain area was too great of an environmental impact. So we relocated the access way from a place that would have a smaller amount of visual and physical impact to the environment.
So that's the only thing that changed was the access way. Where you were situating the pole is the same place?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to ask what kind of revenue is Southside High School going to be able to receive from this? Because I was told back in September of 2018 that the school would see some kind of revenue from this also. So I would like to know that.
That's a district decision. So Mr. Farkas laid out for you what the two types of revenue streams are. And so what Mr. Webb is passing along to you is what we believe is the one that is in the best interest of the district between the two choices. And it shows how we propose to divide that between the school and the district. So you'll see a sheet that shows a revenue, total revenue column, revenue received when the agreement is signed of $25,000, carrier added to tower, so each time a carrier is added, that's $5,000, carrier lease, we believe the better option for the district is to take the money up front instead of over time, which is a total revenue of $130,000. And in our recommendation, when we have a contract, would be for $75,000 to come to the school and $55,000 to come to the district.
Okay, why would you choose that one instead of 40% of gross from the tower leases? What is the amount of the leases? I need to know this information if it would be more than the $100,000. If it's 40% of the gross revenues from the tower leases, if it's over $100,000, why would you choose that?
It is over $100,000, and I believe it breaks out to about $4,500 a year. Is that right, Ms. Stack?
Yes, sir.
And the reason we chose that is not knowing what that environment might look like going forward. We believed it was in the better interest of the school and the district to take the slightly lesser amount, but take it up front. The school realizes a larger amount right off the bat instead of having to get money over time.
Okay, I'm trying to understand this. The one-time advance of $100,000
Yes.
is representing the lease payments for 10 years for each carrier. You're starting out with one carrier on the pole. So if you have 5 carriers on the pole, that's more money. Why would you take the $100,000?
No, this would be the scenario per carrier.
So you would get $100,000 each for
Yes, ma'am.
each
As
carrier.
opposed to taking the breakout over time, you get $100,000 for each carrier, broken out a total of $130,000, broken out 75, 55 between the school and the district.
Okay, still have some questions, but I'll get with you later on that about the money situation, but I also wanted to know, you only have sites on the south side and west side. Did you try to see about sites on the east side, north side? I only see them on the south side and west side. And I know that that community over in south side did not want this in their area. So I know I'm going to have some questions. Why is it located only on the south side and west side of the county?
Well, I can say that we have a great incentive to proactively market every single school site that would be willing to bear the tower. And so we don't choose locations being chosen by companies like AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile and Sprint. And over time, as their networks develop, and they are going to develop in a more dense manner, we fully anticipate that there will be a relatively equal aggregation of future sites. In all of our other partnerships, of which we have 50 other partnerships, there's no geographic preference. It's really just based on the quality of their network in the Greenville area where your sites are located. So we have every incentive to bring as many sites as we can to you for your consideration throughout the school system. We don't have a preference for one over the other.
And I don't recall the two sites, but I do recall one of the two that you mentioned earlier, which is within your agreement with the county, which is on the east side. It's right there on just beyond Mitchell Road Elementary School at the county rec headquarters. Isn't that where that site is?
Yeah, we built the tower at the county rec headquarters, and right now we're just obtaining approval for the Energy Recycling Center, which is another location that was just selected by Verizon.
Well,
That site you're talking about is about a half mile
have you
from
already,
Russian Creek.
have you approached any of the schools on the east side or north side
Well, yeah.
about cell towers like these for south side and Berea?
Yeah, so again, we react to what our customers tell us as to where they want to invest in infrastructure for new sites. So we do our very best to make available to them all the locations that staff has approved. So we're very motivated to develop sites throughout the school system, but it's not our decision as to which locations. It's based on the engineers of the wireless companies that are seeking to invest based on their network. So each site's a snowflake. Every network is different, and they all have different characteristics based on where the current towers are located and when they're going to invest for the future. So, but all I can tell you is that we have absolutely no preference whatsoever as to which sites they pick. We want to make available all the sites that you've agreed to allow us to market.
Okay, I still have some questions, but that's all for right now.
Is that all?
That's all for right now.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Cristobal O'Connor.
May I ask Dr. Royster if this split, 75 for the school and 55 for the district, is that something that we've talked about and that is settled, or is this sort of just a
That's something
suggestion at this
that we would bring to you as a recommendation.
And so if I'm imagining, you fast forward and you think that potentially one day all high schools, let's say, would be asked or marketed to or whatever, and then you would equalize this opportunity, and then if that were the situation, then everybody would get about the same thing, right? Although
If we adopted this and we continued it forward, yes.
Right. So I guess I would just say that because it is South Side, and South Side's needs are greater than most of our high schools, I wonder if there's a proportion that could be considered based on the needs of the students in the school rather than just a split that is fixed for all schools. Is that?
Actually, we set this be taking into consideration the fiscal ability of those two schools. It's Berea and Southside. They're two schools, not just one. That's
Okay.
why, that was what caused us to come forward with 75,000 for the school. As opposed to say like a 50-50 split.
Okay. So it could have been a different recommendation if it was a different, if the school was perceived as having different financial advantages in their communities, for example. It could have, that split could change depending on the school, is what you're saying.
It could, but it puts you in a difficult position to change it, but we set it based on the needs of those two schools.
Okay.
In the
All right.
grand scheme of things for the district, not a huge amount of money. In the grand scheme of things for those schools, it is a very large amount of
Right.
money that would allow them, I think, to do some things that they otherwise don't have the ability to do. Now, in future recommendations, we might consider the ability, so to speak, of the local school. The other thing we don't yet know what's the potential to have these down the road and how many schools might have them, and should we look at splits out to schools besides the school where the tower is located. But then you don't want to do that if 6 months later you put a tower on that school
Right.
site.
Okay.
So that's something for us to look at down the road. This is really kind of our first run at this. But when we looked at the numbers and discussed them, we felt, and I felt very strongly, that because of the communities these two schools serve, that this was a more appropriate split for them.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Bush?
Do we have any other cell towers on any of our properties?
We have one at Serene Stadium, and I'm not sure of any others. There could be. We'll check and see and get you the answer to that. But I know there's one at Serene right behind the home stand.
I remember that one going up at Spring because I remember us having this same discussion about whether the money would go to Greenville High School or whether it would come to the school district. And
I'd have to go back and put, we'll do that too, so you'll have that background information.
yes,
we'll
I
see
would
what
like
that
to have
split
that.
was.
Because I
That's
remember
been,
there was,
I believe that was maybe 15 or 20 years ago, was it? I don't recall it being done. I know it's there, so
Yeah.
it may be more than 15 years ago.
yeah,
We'll,
thank
we'll,
you.
we'll
And see what
pull that up.
revenue we've gotten off of that and where, how that was
Don't
provided.
believe it was quite as lucrative as this.
No, but I remember there being great discussion about whether it went to the school or whether it came to the district. Thank
Well,
you.
I think we view this as an opportunity to help
Yes.
bolster the activity funds of those
Yes.
schools.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No questions? Okay, thank you for your information. Thank you for your presentation, and I hope you have a nice evening.
Thought she was talking to us.
At this point, we'll go to 7.01, Committee and Liaison Reports. And I will ask Mr. Lewis, Advocacy.
Madam Chairman, the Advocacy Committee met today, and just want to remind the board about an upcoming event. On October the 22nd at J.L. Mann, there will be a lunch served, and this will be our invitation to the legislative delegation to come to J.L. Mann and have a conversation about education policy, specifically around Senate Bill 419 and our perspectives and responses to that bill. I sent out the talking points to that by email through Nancy on August the 28th, and then a hard copy is on your desk. So in the interest of time, I won't read over them except to say that all the items that are bolded are items the board has already approved. And the bulleted items beneath it are just further context that relates the items the board has approved to the actual language that's in the bill. So there shouldn't be anything new. The board has already seen this in the spring, and then again it was emailed out in August for the board to provide comment. No board members provided any additional comment, and so the Advocacy Committee is presenting this content for information only. The intent is that agenda for that meeting will involve the superintendent talking and providing a superintendent's report in the same way that he has done at the principal breakfasts. And then then we will kind of go through these talking points as our kind of meat of the section, to kind of speak to the legislators about school board related issues. And then the third item on the agenda would be to invite one of the members of the legislative delegation to give us an update on some of the bills or pending items that they think might be of interest to us. So it's really just an opportunity to use these more to provide content back and forth than to provide a presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions, although this item is being presented for information only.
Okay. Dr. Cristobal O'Connor?
Yes, may I ask, Mr. Lewis, if you would help clarify one thing for me. We often hear and focus on and understand how important it is to teachers and others that we don't have so much time going to testing. But what I want to ask you is if you can help me understand, when I looked over it and it talked about, other than what's required by ESSA or what's not required by the state, et cetera. I'm a little bit confused about it, but I think from all the discussion we've had on the board, one interest I have is making sure that we continue to have tests that allow us to measure ourselves against those other than the state, let's say in norm reference tests, for example. Can you tell me how those kinds of tests, if at all, would be addressed in this bullet item?
Yeah, so I guess the thing I would clarify is our resolution is that we would allow districts the flexibility to opt out of all state mandated testing that's not required by federal law. Does not necessarily take the position that the Greenville School Board is crossing out those tests. It's really just saying that we believe that school districts should have the opportunity, if they choose to opt out of those tests. I don't know that I'm comfortable to speak on behalf of that committee on which test we would recommend we opt out of or not. The only one that we specifically named was the KRA, because this district currently uses the kindergarten readiness assessment, the KRA, and FastBridge, and we have already advocated that FastBridge should replace the KRA because it is a much less staff time intensive assessment and produces immediate results rather than 6 month later results. Other than the KRA, we have not named any tests or had any discussions about which we would opt out of or which we would keep. It just, we believe, kind of goes in line with local control and that local districts should have the ability to opt out if they choose to.
Okay, so let me, if I can ask, if Jeff McCoy were in here, he's not, I know why, because I wasn't expecting that, but may I ask Dr.
Sure,
Royster?
I'll make a run at answering.
Make a run.
Mr. McCoy, and Dr. McDavid, and Mr. Reimer, and Mrs. Hogan are all out of town at a particular conference where they were presenting.
Awesome.
But I think they might be actually on their way back right now.
That's great. Okay, so Mr. Lewis, if you don't mind my switching over to the administration for just a minute to ask, what is, if it says allow districts to opt out of testing mandated by the state and not required by ESSA, we talk about those tests in here all the time and which ones we do and don't. Is SC ready? Anything that we could opt out of?
I'm gonna call on Dr. McCreary to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. The federal requirement is math and English at every grade from 3rd through 8th, and then a certain number of end-of-course tests in high school, one in English, one in math, one in science, and one in, social studies is not required even at the high school level, is it? So there is a high school end of course in U.S. history that would not be required. You have to do a science or math, science or social studies, how often at 3 through 8, Jason?
One in each level, so one in elementary and one in middle school.
And I believe we're exceeding that by maybe twice that amount. So what you're required to do English and math 3 through 8 every year.
Everyone is required in the state.
Yeah, by federal requirement, everyone, yes. And by federal requirement, 3 end of course at the high school level. Our state requires 4. And our state is requiring KRA, which provides no information, usable information back to us.
I can remember that KRA discussion, but I just couldn't remember which tests were. This wouldn't affect if you did MAP testing, because that's what we decide on our own to do, right? We're not.
That is correct. The other one that the state requires, that isn't required by the federal government, but the state requires it for the purpose of identification of gifted and talented, would be the testing at the second grade level.
Iowa,
our current one's Iowa, COGAT. So that's a state requirement, but to meet an identification requirement for gifted and talented. So that's not a federal requirement. Did I leave one out, Jason, that's a state but not a federal? Thank you.
So, just as that's one good example, is what would happen if a district said, we're not going to do COGAT in Iowa for our second graders, and then they weren't able to identify challenge students.
And then they wouldn't be able to draw state funded for gifted and talented students. And I think there's probably a regulatory requirement you have to give to the talented program, but I'd have to look at the specific regulation.
So there'd be an incentive, a financial incentive for them to keep doing that one.
No, there'd be a programmatic incentive, what's the best interest of students incentive, and then, then a financial incentive.
The financial being any additional money they'd get for challenge, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, I just wanted to understand it, because I know that you guys are putting a lot of work into it, and anytime I see, being able to opt out, I want to really understand what we're opting out of, so that we don't inadvertently let go of something that really tells us where we are in important ways, as we've discussed on this board, to say, gosh, we want to know not just how we're doing here, but in comparison to benchmark districts, in comparison to the nation, etc. And we try to add those additional things because we think it gives us a better read than some of the state mandated tests, I guess. But I just imagine that we are ahead of a lot of districts in the information we collect and what we do with it. And I just would not really fully understand what it would mean for a district that is not as strong as Greenville to be able to opt out of state mandated testing. Just help me understand, Mr. Lewis, if that's appropriate to ask, what the conversation was about why School Boards Association is thinking that would be better for students. Is it just about the instructional time they lose, or do they believe they have enough other tests in place if they did that to still diagnostically respond?
So I would not be able to answer how the School Board Association feels about this, because this resolution number 3, to allow high-performing districts the flexibility to opt out of all state-mandated tests not required by federal law, was passed by this board in March. So this is just a repeat of a resolution this board has already passed.
So when you say this board, you mean our
The
board,
Greenville County
not
School Board
South
passed
Carolina
that
School Board?
resolution
Okay.
in March, and we are just repeating it as a talking point that we're going to use. I think the thing that all of these resolutions really come down to is local control. And I think what we are trying to do is give specific examples of where the General Assembly perhaps is forgetting that local school boards are more effective at running local school districts than the State Department of Ed or than the General Assembly is. And so we're reminding them of specific examples of where, if we had more local control, we might make different decisions than the General Assembly is making. But I would not be comfortable saying here or in that meeting what specific things we as a board would get rid of, because we've never had that discussion, or what I think other people should be getting rid of. I remember when this resolution was originally written, it was about the amount of time that teachers have said we're spending testing students unnecessarily. And so I think this was a response to that. The one thing I would clarify, though, is There is even confusion between the House Education Committee, the Senate Education Committee, and the Department of Ed about how many tests are mandated by state and federal law. And so there is a substantial disagreement about what is mandated and what is not. And so I think this is really just kind of trying to open that door, not to specifically name any test that we would recommend that we would do.
Okay, thank you for that. And is there a definition clear on what high-performing districts
Yeah.
are?
We,
That's something to be determined.
us, and others.
So if Greenville wants to, yeah, I understand. To be determined. I think.
Yes, ma'am.
No, thank you very much.
Okay.
The only thing I just would repeat to the board before I give up the floor is it's October the 22nd at J.L. Mann High School, and it's at lunch, and it's already on the board calendar. And even if you are not a member of the advocacy committee, we'd still encourage you to come. And if you have a relationship with your legislator, to invite them to come, because I think a personal invitation from you to them may go further than me and Senator Turner inviting them or the superintendent. So we encourage everybody to attend, and we look forward to a good discussion. There was also a discussion at the advocacy committee meeting about some possible legislative action that is working to make it easier for the State Department of Ed and superintendent to take over local school boards. And at this time, we are just having discussions about these discussions that are happening in Columbia. There is no specific action that we would recommend this board take at this time, except to hear at this meeting what our delegation thinks about that action. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Meek?
Yes, ma'am. The Ad hoc Committee on Personnel Policies met this afternoon, had a lively discussion about the sick leave, and we have no recommendations for the board yet. It'll probably be several months before we do have any recommendations, but we did work quite a lot this afternoon. I think we let the administration know exactly or closely what we'd like to see for them in a couple of months, and I think they've agreed to bring that back to us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Meek. Mr. Sailors?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to thank everybody for participating in the regional advocacy event that was able to come down. We've got one more left, which is tomorrow evening, and look forward to having everybody in Charleston in December. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, 7.01, Finance. Finance report. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Levinus-Wells. I don't believe Ms. Stack has a report tonight, but she is available to respond to any question that you might have regarding fund balance or anything else.
Mr. Meek, are you into the fund balance tonight?
Not tonight, thank you.
I'd say he's exhausted.
That was just for Jeff.
Only for Jeff.
Keep Jeff straight.
Yes, sir. There's a motion on the floor to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Bush. All in favor, please address by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you, and y'all have a nice evening.